Alright, Mopar people, welcome back to the channel. I'm just Mopar Joe. I had a lot of y'all asking about my 70 Challenger, and I figured I would take you down memory lane, kind of on its journey over the past 7 or 8 years. I've totally built this car from the ground up. Learned some good lessons on where to spend my money and where not to, and I picked up a lot of good skills. A lot of fabrication stuff, some bodywork stuff, other stuff like that. So y'all check out these pictures and let me know what you think. Y'all check out my 70 Challenger here. This was original slant 6 3-speed in the floor car. So it was a stick. Dad and I went up to Central Missouri and bought this car. I do believe it is an original Missouri car. You can see how bad the salt had eaten the front fenders off of it. Here you can see the firewall was pretty bad. I had to patch a lot of that stuff. The old voltage regulator was just melted down the firewall, of course. Oh, here's a right rear quarter panel. I have no idea in the world why they cut the gas cap off of it. I would assume it didn't have a flip top gas cap being a slant 6 car, but maybe that was a weird option they added. But yeah, it looks like somebody took a sawzall and just cut that patch panel out, probably because they were going to throw this car away. I want to say I gave $600 or $800 for it. It had a good title. All the numbers were right on the car. It even had a fender tag, but no engine or transmission. 7 1/4 rear end. That's a pretty bad rot there. Here's the front floor pans. They were destroyed. Surprisingly, only just very small patches in those front frame rails were bad. I was able to patch out from my brother had bought some frame caps for his 68 Roadrunner and had a big piece left over, and I was just able to graft that in right where I needed it. Rear floor pans were about the same, a little bit better, but just rotted out. This sucker was pretty rough. As you'll be able to tell soon. This was kind of cool. I threw this picture in for the University UMKC 82 and 83. So I'd try to imagine, somebody driving this car back and forth to their college or whatever. Had a parking pass for a couple years at least. I don't know if they made it out or not, but their Dodge is still alive. The first step I had going here, and I was actually able to save these tail lights. Lenses and the surrounds. I redid the surrounds, the parts that were kind of rusted and pitted. I took some really fine sandpaper and sanded that, masked it off, and painted that just kind of an argent silver. So most of them are still chrome, but the parts that were, pretty bad, they got a silver coating on them, over them. Let's see, yeah, the shocks. You see those rear shocks hanging down still. This is before I cut the rear out of the car. More rust and rot. I had to redo a lot of the inner fender wells also. Through my trunk, where the lid would be, you can see the pavement because I actually drilled out all those spot wells and pulled the rear subframe out and the trunk extensions. And I bought a kit from Dynacorn. I want to say it was $1,700 or $2,100, but it had both rear frame rails, the gas tank strap, everything you needed to weld that whole section in, and it was all welded together already. So that was a lot easier job than buying them piece by piece by piece and then having to weld it. So it looks a lot more factory inside, and it's a lot stronger. I come to the firewall, so I wanted to show you this again, just a different angle, and then where I went next with it. This is actually POR 15 after I got it all down to bare metal, which took a long time, did my patches. I coated everything there in POR 15, and I went through all 5 steps or whatever it is of degreasing, metal etching, and then the POR. So it's on. My next step, I want to say I had to use 80 grit to scuff the POR 15 and then shot it with a high build 2K. And after that, just whited it out. So I had all that done. This is EW1 white. I believe they also call it Spinnaker white. So I was really proud of that, and then I was able to send the car off to the body shop because it was going to need both rear quarters. So I was going to pay a guy. He was a paint and body guy, and I had him paint my 72 Demon for me. And I thought, yeah, the car looked pretty slick. It needed minor body work, just some Bondo and refinishing, and then shot it with single stage here. Here's after the car was cut and buffed, stripes on the way to the drag races. Love that car, but so I sent him, when I picked this purple car up, I actually dropped my Challenger off. And lo and behold, here's where it starts to get ugly. So, lesson learned. This is the right rear quarter panel, and they actually screwed. Well, I'll take it back. So I went and picked the car up because he was sending me some pictures, and I was starting to say, man, this is looking rough. And he said, yeah, he hired a new body guy or whatever. He mostly does paint or something. I don't remember what all the excuses were, but he had screwed the taillight panel, which I bought a new taillight panel, new deck lid, both full new quarters, both trunk extensions. Everything was new in the back. All I had to do was cut the old ones off, put the new ones on. And, you know, I'd never messed with any of that, and I thought it would be too much work for me. So I went ahead and sent him this car. And when I got it, you can see that trunk gap there. They had actually filled that in with Bondo so that it would be a nice tight trunk gap. And the panel right above the trunk was also packed with Bondo and just booger welded with a 110 wire welder. It was the worst excuse I've ever seen for body work I could ever imagine anyone doing. And I actually paid him to do this. Like, I picked my car up and handed him money, didn't realize what I had going until I got it home. We picked it up that night, brought it home, and this was just god awful. Here's a picture of where the quarter meets the top, and they had took their 110 welder and tacked it. What they had, I guess, thought they were welding, had tried to weld it up to the lead seam. So they were welding the metal to the lead in that seam and just left it like that. He said, oh yeah, it's ready to go. Just finish your Bondo work and it'll be good to go, man. And here's the section right above, or right below the rear quarter glass. And they had cut the inner lip of that off, so it was just hanging over. There's nothing. I had to go and reference another Challenger to be able to make it right, to make mine look factory again after they had boogered this up so bad. Here's a picture of where the trunk rail meets that top panel. You see all the screws they had in it over and over again. It's just rough. There's one sheet metal screw still in there. It's like they couldn't figure out how the pieces went, so they just put them the easiest way for them to do. And it was bad. Here's the other side, giant gap there, big hole, more sheet metal screws. And I used screws to hold it together so I could weld it, but then I pulled the screws out and I welded them up. I had to take a wire wheel. You can see a lot of that where the Bondo had been taken off because they just coated screw heads in Bondo. There was no getting past it. Here's where they put that rear trunk, the rear taillight panel on top of those rails, and just screwed it on the outside of the deal there. You know, like that's just super poor craftsmanship. Here's one I still don't understand, how when they noticed the trunk extension didn't line up with the quarter, they just left it. Like you can see, that's an inch off. Those holes are supposed to be lined up, and that's how I did it. After I took all this crap back apart, I just bolted the holes back up and everything lined up perfectly. How do you mess that up? Back glass, there's just a giant piece of metal missing there. I'm assuming they just cut it off with a body saw. Here's one of my favorites. Right rear quarter panel had split where I guess they had just ground it so much. And then just packed it full of Bondo. Why weld it up when you can just pack it full of Bondo? I went ahead and took a measurement there. There was Bondo like a 1/2 inch thick in that one spot. But it's, just show you what it is here. Here's kind of a rough picture of after I fixed it. All my tools and stuff, trying to figure it out. I was proud. Like when I walked out of the shop that day, you can still see the haze. Everything's back together nice and tight. You can see my panels at the top where the quarter meets the roof line. I went ahead and just cut out a strip, and I cut out all that lead, and I actually welded that back together with a piece of new metal that was that same thickness as both panels. Left rear quarters lined up, looks a lot better. Same thing. And then off to my actual body shop. My uncle did a lot of my body work for me here. And this was one that he actually did well for me on, getting all the body lines right, which he was really a master at. And you can look at the car now and tell it's laser straight. Fitting panel gaps, he showed me a lot of that. A lot of people didn't realize I have VFN fiberglass front fenders and hood on this car. And the major reason I did that, I thought, well, they'd be a little bit lighter. And also they were $600 or $800 cheaper. And seemed to be great quality. The panel gaps lined up super nice. Here's a picture of it in primer. He was very pleased with these. He's been doing body work a long time, said they were really nice pieces. So you'll see here in just a second. Trunk jams painted nice and white again. Did those in acrylic enamel, painted the rest of the car in base clear, and you really cannot tell a difference at all between the two. If the trunk's raised or something, that's what I wanted, just a really nice quality car. There you can see that fiberglass hood. It doesn't have the holes cut out for the small scoops, and I knew that was fine. They don't hold water, they don't leak on my engine compartment, they don't, nothing like that. And I'm totally fine with that. I like to look at the car. Here it is in primer again. And finally, after base and clear, paint turned out pretty nice on it. Got it back to my shop, got my good wheels and tires on. And here's my front grille. And the story behind this grille, this was from my dad's old Challenger from the 80s. And he ended up hitting a deer with his car. And the guy at the body shop said, you know, that grill's not really bad, but we can go ahead and get you a new one. Dad said, well, sure. So this grill probably hung on the wall in his shop for at least 20, 25 years. You know, it made it from the mid-80s until I built this car, and I basically built the car around the grill. You go to buy a new grill now, they're close to $1,000 or $1,200, and this one's in really good shape. I didn't repaint anything on it. I think I straightened one fin, and that was all. Here's the first engine I ever put in the car, and y'all know my love for 413s. This was actually a 413 identical to the one that I built, but it did have closed chamber heads. So closed chamber heads and the big like 532 Mopar cam in it, purple shaft cam. It was a hoss. It really was. Here's it on the way to the exhaust shop, muffler shop, just to get my Gosel car sounds. Here's that paint after I cut and buffed it. And in the background you can see a 4-door satellite. That 4-door satellite is actually the car that my rear end came out of. It was a 69 satellite, and I got the 8 3/4 out of it, and I did a swap video into my Challenger. I can try to put a link up for it somewhere. So the car actually has a good rear end in it now. And here's kind of a video of that 413. Man, it sounded good. Nice. Into the fad, I fell into the trap. Everybody does. My 413 was actually kind of, it had some good blow by, burning a little bit of oil, and the cam was really too big for what I was doing on the street. I didn't have enough gear for it either. So I found this 2005 Durango online for $800. Bought it. It was running and driving. Went ahead and pulled the engine apart. It is 10 over. It's got ported heads and a 6.1 cam, new oil pump, new rod bearings, main bearings, rings, new pistons. They're just like a stock replacement piston. You can see the Milodon oil pan here. I had to make some headers for it. They're a little bit ugly, but if you go to buy some new headers for a Hemi swap, you're going to spend $800 to $1,000. So I actually took the big block headman headers that I had, cut the tubes, and bought some flanges, and they're on. Here's a picture of them on the car, under the car. So everything lines up nicely. There's a mini starter like you can see there. I got a Ram kind of street strip clutch in it, so I know it'll never fail on me for my power level. I want to say it's a Hurst flywheel I found online that adapts the 833 to the new model Hemi. And there's that new Hemi setting in the car before I switched the OCP intake and upgraded the computer. Took my air conditioner off. And here's one of my first long trips in the car. This was only 20 minutes from the house, but I got to go see my grandpa in the nursing home. This was probably the last trip I saw him before he passed away. So I was excited to have taken that picture. And you know, I parked right outside of his window and pointed at the car and told him about it. He could see the car. You know, he sat up in the bed and looked at it and stuff. So that was really cool. But yeah, it kind of puts me to where I am at today. So I appreciate y'all coming along for the journey. Let's go for a ride. What do you say?